The fire is a small, defiant pulse of warmth against the vast, encroaching darkness of the African savanna. Elias, a man weathered by sun and solitude, sits hunched beside it, the familiar scent of wood smoke a thin veil against the primordial odors of the night. It's a quiet that's too quiet, a stillness that hums with unseen energies. He feels it on his skin, that ancient prickle of awareness, the sense of being observed not by a single predator, but by the land itself, and perhaps by something more. The events of the day replay in his mind, a vivid tableau of dust, fear, and a desperate gamble. What happened hours ago, under the merciless sun, was extraordinary, a moment where the veil between man and wild had thinned to a mere breath. And now, as the stars blaze with cold indifference, he senses the consequence, an unseen audience gathering in the immense, silent theater of the night. Before we dive into the heart of this extraordinary encounter, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe that moments of unexpected connection, even kindness, can exist in the wildest of places, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that reveal the profound depths of the natural world. Elias knew this land. He'd walked its paths for over 20 years, first as a young, eager researcher, now as a seasoned ranger, a guardian of its fragile balances. He understood its rhythms, its cruelties, and its fleeting moments of breathtaking beauty. But the tension coiling around his small, isolated camp tonight was new. It wasn't the straightforward threat of a prowling leopard or the distant cough of a lion on the hunt. This was different, a pervasive, intelligent scrutiny. He'd risked much that day, driven by a core of compassion that even years of harsh reality couldn't erode. He'd freed a king from a cruel, man-made trap, and now, it seemed, the king's court had come calling. The air, thick with the scent of dust and dry grass, suddenly grew heavy, charged. And then, a sound, low and resonant, vibrated through the ground beneath him, a sound that wasn't a prelude to attack, but a declaration. A presence. Many presences. The silence that followed was even more profound, more unnerving. Something was about to shift in that consuming darkness. Elias had risen that morning with the sun, the cool pre-dawn air already hinting at the scorching day to come. His small research outpost, little more than a sturdy tent and a reinforced supply shed, sat nestled in a sparse grove of acacia trees, an island in the sea of golden-brown grasses that stretched to the hazy horizon. He was a man of routine, his days dictated by the needs of the wildlife reserve he monitored and the slow, meticulous gathering of data. He was not a man given to flights of fancy, his observations grounded in science and long experience. Yet, he carried within him a profound respect, almost a reverence, for the creatures he studied, an understanding that went beyond mere biology. He'd seen their intelligence, their complex social structures, their capacity for what looked, to human eyes, like emotion. The dry season was tightening its grip on the land. The rivers had shrunk to trickles, the waterholes were muddy bowls where animals congregated in uneasy truces. It was a time of stress, of heightened tension, when the line between survival and succumbing was at its thinnest. His patrol that day had started like any other, a wide circuit along the reserve's southern boundary, checking for signs of poaching, monitoring animal movements, the familiar weight of his rifle slung over his shoulder more for deterrence than use. He preferred his camera, his notebook, the quiet art of observation. It was mid-morning, the sun already a hammer blow, when he found the first sign. A disturbed patch of earth, almost invisible to an untrained eye, a faint scuff mark in the baked soil near a game trail regularly used by a local lion pride he'd been observing for years. His breath caught. He knelt, his fingers tracing the subtle indentation. Then, a glint of metal, fine and sinister, winking from beneath a carelessly scattered handful of leaves. A snare. A poacher's snare, crudely effective and utterly indiscriminate. Anger, cold and familiar, tightened his jaw. These silent, patient killers were a blight he fought constantly, a shadow of human greed cast over this wild sanctuary. He disarmed it carefully, coiling the treacherous wire, his mind already cataloging the area, searching for further evidence. Poachers rarely set a single trap. He spent the next hour meticulously quartering the surrounding bush, his senses on high alert. The air was still, the usual chorus of birdsong strangely muted. The heat shimmered above the parched ground, distorting the familiar shapes of thorn trees and termite mounds. He found 2 more snares, equally well concealed, equally lethal. The pride, he knew, favored this area. Their dominant male, a magnificent black-maned lion he'd nicknamed Ascari for his regal bearing, often rested in the shade of a nearby sausage tree. A sudden unease, sharp and specific, pierced through Elias's professional focus. Ascari hadn't been sighted for 2 days, a subtle deviation from his routine that Elias had noted but attributed to the vastness of his territory. Now, that absence felt ominous. The catalyst, when it came, was not a sight but a sound, a low, guttural growl, so weak it was almost lost in the rustle of dry leaves stirred by a phantom breeze. It was a sound of profound suffering, stripped of all its usual power, raw and desperate. Elias froze, his head snapping up, every nerve thrumming. He knew that voice, or what was left of it. He moved cautiously towards the sound, his rifle now held ready, not knowing what he would find, if poachers were still in the vicinity, or if some other tragedy had unfolded. He pushed through a curtain of tall, straw-colored grass, and his heart constricted. There, in a small, dusty clearing, was Ascari. The massive lion, a creature of awe-inspiring strength and savage grace, was down, one powerful foreleg caught fast in the unyielding grip of a heavy-gauge wire snare, anchored to the base of a sturdy mopane sapling. The wire had bitten deep, a raw, bloody furrow circling the thick limb. The surrounding earth was torn and gouged, testament to the lion's desperate, futile struggles. His tawny coat was matted with dust and sweat, his immense ribcage heaving with shallow, rapid breaths. His golden eyes, usually burning with fierce independence, were clouded with pain and exhaustion, but as Elias stepped into the clearing, a spark of a different fire ignited within them, defiance. A hoarse, ragged roar ripped from Ascari's throat, a shadow of his true voice, but still laden with threat. He strained against the wire, the muscles in his shoulder bunching, the snare tightening its cruel embrace, drawing a fresh wave of agony that made him shudder. Elias stopped, holding his hands up, palms open, a gesture of peace he hoped the distressed animal might, on some level, comprehend. "Easy, old friend," he murmured, his voice low and calm, a stark contrast to the frantic hammering of his own heart. "Easy now. I'm not here to hurt you." The lion's only response was another growl, weaker this time, followed by a heavy sigh as his great head sank to the dust. He was clearly nearing the end of his endurance. The sun beat down mercilessly. Flies buzzed around the raw wound. Elias knew the risks. A cornered, wounded lion was unpredictability incarnate. One wrong move, one misjudged signal, and those formidable jaws, those immense claws, could end his life in seconds. Yet, the thought of leaving Ascari to this slow, agonizing death, or to the inevitable arrival of hyenas, was unbearable. The poacher's cruelty demanded a response, and compassion, in this moment, outweighed caution. He unslung his pack slowly, never taking his eyes off the lion. Ascari watched him, his breathing harsh, suspicion and pain warring in his gaze. Elias retrieved a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters and a small medical kit containing antiseptic and bandages, standard equipment for his patrols, though rarely used on a predator of this magnitude. The immediate challenge was getting close enough. The snare was on the lion's left foreleg. To reach it, Elias would have to position himself directly in front of the animal, within range of a desperate lunge. He began to talk, a soft, continuous murmur, the way one might soothe a frightened horse. He spoke of the heat, the thirst, the injustice of the trap, anything to fill the silence with a non-threatening human sound, to weave a fragile thread of connection across the chasm of fear and instinct. He took a step, then another, his movements fluid, unhurried. Ascari's ears twitched. His massive head lifted slightly, those golden eyes fixed on Elias with an unnerving intensity. The growling rumbled again, deeper this time, a warning from the very core of his being. Elias paused, holding his ground. He could see the tension in the lion's powerful shoulders, the slight tremor running through its trapped limb. The wire was cutting deeper with every strained movement. Time was not on their side. He needed the lion to be still, to conserve what little strength it had left. "I need to cut that wire, Ascari," Elias said softly, as if the lion could understand the words themselves rather than the intent behind them. "It's killing you. Let me help." He crouched lower, trying to make himself appear smaller, less dominant. He extended the wire cutters slowly, letting the lion see them, smell them if the wind shifted. Ascari watched, his body rigid. Minutes stretched into an eternity, measured by the lion's ragged breaths and the oppressive pulse of the African heat. Elias edged forward again, centimeter by painful centimeter. He could smell the lion now, the dusty scent of its fur, the metallic tang of blood, the faint, acrid odor of fear. He was close now, dangerously close. The lion's head was mere feet from his own. He could see the individual whiskers, the pulse throbbing in its neck. A sudden shift. Ascari's body tensed, a low growl building in his chest. Elias froze instantly. Had he pushed too far, too fast? The lion's eyes, dilated and fierce, locked onto his. For a heart-stopping moment, Elias was certain Ascari would lunge, trapped or not. But then, something shifted in those golden depths. A flicker of, what? Resignation? A dawning, primal understanding? The growl subsided into a low moan. The massive head lowered again, resting on the dust, though the eyes remained fixed on Elias. It was a gamble, a terrible, silent negotiation of trust over instinct. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Elias reached forward with the cutters. His hand trembled slightly as he positioned the blades around the taut, cruel wire. The steel was thick, designed to hold. He squeezed, the muscles in his forearm straining. The cutters bit, but didn't sever. Ascari flinched, a pained grunt escaping him, but he didn't move, didn't attack. It was as if he understood, on some profound level, that this new pain was a necessary step towards release. Elias repositioned the cutters, sweat stinging his eyes, blurring his vision. He could hear the distant, mournful call of a dove, a stark counterpoint to the strained silence of the clearing. He focused all his strength, all his will, into that single movement. The wire creaked, groaned. He squeezed harder. Another strand parted with a sharp ping. Then another. The lion remained unervingly still, its gaze unwavering. It was a display of endurance, of will, that humbled Elias. He was witnessing the raw courage of a king, even in its darkest hour. The heat was becoming unbearable. His shirt clung to his back. Dust filled his nostrils. He could feel the tremors of exhaustion starting in his own limbs. But Ascari's silent fortitude fueled him. He worked methodically, carefully, trying to avoid jarring the injured leg. Each snip of the wire felt like a small victory against the encroaching darkness. He imagined the relief the lion must feel as the pressure lessened, bit by bit. Far off, the unmistakable whoop of a hyena drifted on the breeze, a chilling reminder of the savanna's ever-watchful opportunists. The sound seemed to inject a fresh wave of urgency into Elias. Finally, only one thick strand of wire remained, biting deeply into the swollen flesh just above Ascari's paw. This was the most critical cut. If the lion jerked now, the sharp end could cause even more damage. Almost there, old man, Elias whispered, his voice hoarse. Just hold on. Just a little longer. He positioned the cutters with meticulous care, took a breath, and squeezed with all his might. There was a loud, sharp snap. The last strand parted. The tension on the leg visibly released. Ascari let out a long, shuddering groan, a sound that was part pain, part profound relief. He lay still for a moment, his chest heaving, then slowly, agonizingly, he tried to pull his leg free. The embedded wire, now loose, scraped against raw flesh. Elias watched, his heart in his throat, ready to retreat in an instant. The lion managed to pull its limb clear, a ragged, bleeding mess. It lay there, panting, the injured paw held awkwardly off the ground. Freedom, but at a terrible cost. Elias backed away slowly, giving the lion space. Ascari lifted his great head and looked at him. There was no aggression in his eyes now, only a deep, weary, and utterly unreadable expression. It was a gaze that seemed to penetrate Elias, to see something beyond the immediate moment. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an age. Then, with a monumental effort, Ascari began to struggle to his feet. He was unsteady, his injured leg clearly causing immense pain, but he was driven by an indomitable will. He stood, swaying slightly, a king still, though wounded and diminished. He took a tentative step, then another, limping heavily, and began to move towards the cover of the dense thorn scrub, away from the exposed clearing. He didn't look back. Elias remained where he was, his limbs trembling with reaction. The adrenaline drained away, leaving him feeling hollowed out, exhausted, but also with a profound sense of quiet triumph. He watched until the last flicker of Ascari's tawny tail disappeared into the bushes. Only then did he allow himself to sag, sitting heavily on the dusty ground, the wire cutters falling from his numb hand. The silence of the bush rushed back in, no longer menacing, but filled with the quiet hum of life persisting. He knew Ascari's ordeal wasn't over. The wound was severe, susceptible to infection. Survival was still a gamble, but he had given him a chance. That was all he could do. He collected the pieces of the snare, a grim trophy, and began the long walk back to his camp, the sun beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and bruised purple. Night fell quickly, as it does in Africa, the brief twilight surrendering to a deep, stardusted blackness. Elias built up his fire, the crackling flames a small comfort against the immensity of the wilderness. He ate a meager meal, his mind replaying the encounter, the intensity of Ascari's gaze seared into his memory. He felt an unusual weariness, not just physical, but emotional. He had intervened, crossed a boundary, and the wild had a way of responding to such interventions, sometimes in ways one could never predict. He checked the perimeter of his camp, a habit born of years of solitude in remote places. The acacias whispered secrets in the night breeze. The distant sounds of the savannah were muted tonight, a low, subtle hum rather than the usual cacophony of calls and cries. It was this unsettling quiet that first put him on edge. He settled onto his cot, the canvas of the tent a thin barrier against the world outside. Sleep, however, was elusive. Every creak of the tent poles, every rustle of leaves, seemed amplified. It began subtly, a faint sound, almost imperceptible, like a heavy body brushing against dry grass. Elias lay still, his senses instantly alert. He told himself it was a zebra, perhaps a wandering antelope. But the sound came again, closer this time, from a different direction. And then another, and another, until a soft, almost rhythmic pattern of movement encircled the camp. There was no growling, no aggressive posturing, just the undeniable presence of large, heavy bodies moving with a deliberate stealth that was far more unnerving than any overt threat. His heart began to pound, a dull thud against his ribs. He reached slowly for the powerful flashlight beside his cot, his fingers closing around its cool metal casing. He sat up, his ears straining. The fire outside had burned down to glowing embers, casting a faint, pulsing orange light that did little to penetrate the profound darkness beyond its immediate circle. He could hear breathing now, soft, deep inhalations and exhalations, too many to count. They were close, very close. With a surge of adrenaline, he unzipped the tent flap, peering out. The embers cast long, dancing shadows, and for a moment, he saw nothing but the familiar shapes of the acacia trees. Then, a pair of eyes caught the faint light, glowing with an eerie, pale luminescence. And another pair. And another. He scanned the perimeter, his blood running cold. The camp was surrounded. Lions. Not one or two, but a multitude. He could make out their massive, shadowy forms, low to the ground, patient, utterly silent except for their breathing. It was the entire pride. Fear, primal and stark, gripped him. He was trapped. His rifle was propped near the fire, a dozen paces away, in impossible distance. He was alone, vulnerable, encircled by a dozen or more of Africa's apex predators. He thought of Ascari. Was this retribution? Had his act of mercy been misinterpreted as a threat, a challenge? His mind raced, searching for an explanation, a course of action. Panic clawed at him, but years of training, of facing down danger in the wild, asserted a fragile control. He knew that sudden movements, signs of fear, could trigger an attack. He stepped out of the tent slowly, his hands held open, away from his body. He needed to rebuild the fire, to create more light, a stronger barrier. The lions watched him, their heads low, their eyes unwavering. There was no snarling, no agitated tail flicking, none of the usual pre-attack behaviors. Just this unnerving, collective, silent scrutiny. It was a siege of presence, a psychological pressure that was almost unbearable. He moved towards the dwindling fire, each step measured, deliberate. The closest lion, a large lioness, was no more than 15 feet away. He could see the faint outline of her powerful shoulders, the glint of her eyes. She watched him approach the fire pit, her gaze intense, unblinking. He reached for the pile of sparewood he'd gathered, his movements economical, trying to project an aura of calm he was far from feeling. As he added logs to the embers, they smoked, then caught, flames leaping up, pushing back the suffocating darkness. The increased light illuminated the circle of watchers more clearly. He counted at least 10, perhaps 12, lions. Lionesses mostly, and some subadults. They were arranged in a loose crescent, effectively sealing off any escape. They simply sat, or lay, sphinx-like, their attention utterly focused on him and his small camp. The air was thick with their scent, a wild, musky odor that was both thrilling and terrifying. He backed away slowly towards his camp chair, never turning his back on them, and sat. There was nothing else to do but wait, to observe, to try and understand this extraordinary, terrifying visitation. Hours passed. The moon, a pale sliver, climbed the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the savannah. The lions did not move. They watched. Sometimes, a head would turn, an ear would flick, but the collective gaze remained fixed. Elias kept the fire fed, the simple task a lifeline for his sanity. He found himself studying them, not as a scientist, but as a man confronted by an ancient mystery. What did they want? Why the silent, unnerving vigil? He thought again of Ascari. He scanned the shadowy forms, looking for him, for a sign of the injured male. Was he out there, among them, directing this strange assembly? He couldn't be sure. None of the lions seemed to be limping obviously in the dim light, but their stillness made individual identification difficult. Then, as the first faint hint of gray began to dilute the deep black of the eastern sky, a subtle shift occurred within the pride. One of the larger lionesses, one who had been particularly still and watchful, rose to her feet. She stretched, a ripple of power flowing through her lithe body. She looked directly at Elias, a long, steady gaze, then turned and, with a soft chuffing sound that seemed almost like a signal, began to melt back into the thorn scrub. One by one, the others followed. They didn't rush. Their departure was as deliberate, as unhurried, as their arrival. Massive, shadowy forms detaching themselves from the edge of the firelight and disappearing into the returning gloom of the pre-dawn bush. Within minutes, they were gone. All of them, as silently as they had come. Elias sat, stunned, the tension slowly ebbing from his body, leaving him weak and trembling. The fire crackled, suddenly loud in the renewed stillness. He looked around at the empty perimeter, at the places where the lions had been, half expecting to see their indentations in the dust. There was nothing but the awakening sounds of the savannah, the first chirp of a cricket, the distant call of a francolin. As the sun's rim breached the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of fiery orange and soft rose, one last shadow detached itself from a thicket of acacia near where Ascari had disappeared the previous day. It was him. Unmistakable, even at a distance, by the slight favoring of his front leg, the proud set of his black-maned head. He didn't approach the camp. He stood for a long moment at the edge of the clearing, his golden coat burnished by the dawn light. He looked towards Elias, towards the small tent and the dying fire. It was another long, unreadable gaze, a silent acknowledgement across the vastness. Then, with a barely perceptible nod of his great head, he turned and slowly, majestically, followed the path his pride had taken, disappearing into the burgeoning light of the new day. Elias watched him go, a profound sense of awe washing over him, banishing the last vestiges of fear. He didn't understand what had happened, not fully. It wasn't a simple thank you in human terms. The wild was far more complex, its motivations deeper, more ancient. Perhaps it had been a display of power, an inspection, a curiosity about the strange two-legged creature who had interacted so unusually with their leader. Or perhaps it was something more, a recognition, a momentary truce in the eternal dance between their worlds, brokered by an act of desperate compassion. He would never know for sure. But as he stood there, bathed in the warm light of the African sunrise, he felt a connection to this land and its magnificent inhabitants that was deeper and more resonant than ever before. The night of the lions had changed him, leaving an indelible mark on his soul. The silence that returned to the savannah was no longer empty, but filled with the echo of an extraordinary, unspoken understanding. The world is full of wonders, many of them hidden in the quiet courage of animals and the compassionate hearts of those who protect them. Thanks for watching. If this story of an incredible encounter touched you, give it a like and subscribe for more wild moments of wonder that remind us of the profound connections we share with the natural world.